football. It's a sport watched and played by people all over the world. Its stars are household names and can make millions playing for some of the biggest teams. The early days of football are not as well documented as that now. But what we do know is its beginnings were unruly and wild. This guy's face says it all. Historians say medieval football was pretty much a free-for-all, with few rules other than getting the ball into one of the two goals. This was a game which would sometimes involve entire villages pitted against one another. So, instead of 11 players, you'd have potentially hundreds of people playing against each other. Absolute mayhem. Oh, and you can bet it was extremely violent. It's not really surprising then, according to FIFA's history, the majority of references to it before the 1800s are about trying to ban it. In 1608, for example, it was banned in Manchester, a city now rich in football, because of broken windows. By the 1800s, folk football was still a game for a lot of people, and the goals could be as much as 3 miles apart. That works out as more than 50 modern football pitches, if you were wondering. There was no standard size or shape for a ball. Usually they just used a pig's bladder. Games would happen around the same time as country fairs, and just like its medieval precursor, it was pretty violent.
During the Shrovetide game, working men from 2 rival towns fight to move the ball from one end of Ashbourne to the other. Last year, man drowned.
By this time, public schools, aka schools you pay for, were also playing their own versions of football. English public schools like Eton, Harrow and Winchester were attended by boys from the upper classes and aristocracy. Football was seen as a way to toughen them up. Each school drew up their own rules and code, making football into the gentleman's game.
It's our game.
Your game?
We invented it.
Who's we? The old Etonians?
Yes! As a matter of fact, Eton, Charterhouse, Harrow. Lots of schools played a part, but the point is we took a raggle-taggle pastime with different rules wherever it was played, and we turned it into a proper game for gentlemen.
But each school having different rules caused some problems. So rugby school, for example, said you could carry the ball, which led to the formation of rugby league and rugby union, but that's an entirely different game. In Eton and Harrow, they like dribbling. Most of them even had their own version of offside. Truly a nightmare. And with the Industrial Revolution, more people were travelling around and discovering that different areas too had their own versions of football. And how are you meant to play each other if none of you can agree on the rules?
No extra time was agreed before the game.
Since when was that a rule? It's not in Scotland.
It is here.
So people tried to make sense of the different rules. That included some confused Cambridge University students in 1848 and the founding members of Sheffield Football Club in 1857. Eventually, 11 clubs got together in a London pub in 1863 to form the Football Association. This led to them finally agreeing on a bunch of rules, which changed over the years to become the game we know today. Now, most of the founding members of the FA were from those public schools. In short, football was pretty posh, not to mention very English. And when they started playing the FA Cup in 1871, the early winners were those upper-class teams formed of men who went to these public schools. But 5 of the 12 founding members were from towns with mills, industrial towns with a growing population of working-class people. Football had really grown in these communities thanks to new laws which added structure to the working day.
If you join Blackburn, we'll be the first working man's team to lift the FA Cup.
That leads us up nicely to the timeline of the English game, which features the tension between the upper-class players and the working-class teams.
So we should just surrender football to the working class.
We should share football with the working class.